We're here in New Liberty, at the home of Lucea Moody, 95-year-old, the last one-room school teacher here in Owen County, and perhaps maybe even the Commonwealth.
Of course I am. I'm interested in everybody I meet.
This home was built in 1880.
Home was built when?
Yes, 1880. And I was raised 2 doors down from here. And I guess I'm the only person in New Liberty that's living that knows much about what's going on. But anyway, I lost my husband 9 years ago, but we've got some farms. We've got 3 farms here. And we lived out on my home place, but we came in here and bought this in 1950 and restored it.
Oh my goodness.
And the furniture in it is all my family pieces and things.
Well, isn't that nice to be able to have
Beautiful.
a place where you can enjoy things that are family things? You got memories attached to probably everything, don't you?
I don't have a living blood relative, and we had no children. Some people say, aren't you lonely? Well, I said, yeah, but I don't have to fight with my relatives. I just don't have a bit of trouble in the world with them. Come on in. And so go, if you're going, walk down to the end of the steps, Mr. Pratt. Look up.
Oh, isn't that gorgeous? Oh my goodness.
It's beautiful, isn't it?
I have all 3 of them. And they say, oh, you ought to go to a nursing home. Well, I'll tell you, all those are suit of furniture in there.
Oh my goodness. This is spectacular.
Has he got a bomb in that hand?
A bomb?
I believe that's what he's got it.
He's got a, I think it's some sort of a tripod thing where he holds his camera.
Oh, I see. Well, in this town, that is still in those people. Everybody else is gone.
No.
But getting back to Little Hope, I presume you know that in the county, it was customary, or I don't know whether they did it, or whether they just had a gentleman's agreement or not, but prominent landowners would give the land for a school, with the understanding that if it ceased to be a school, it would go back to the original owner. Now that was the way we got our land sites for them. The Poplar Grove School, the first one, sat down right in that little, I don't know what you call those, a ground, it looks like a sinkhole, but by the church, it sat by that church. And my great-great-grandfather gave the land for the church. And I'm sure he did for the school too. I finished one school out in Poplar Grove. But now, this is what I know about Little Hope. It was on the land of Barney Raleigh, which of course was Hazel's father-in-law. And the Rileys had one son, but he had already completed his 8th grade. See, we just had 8th grade, you know. And we went to school in July and got out the latter part of February, or 1st of March, so that the boys could help in the crops and so forth and so on, and save heat. I went there to teach in 1928. I had just finished a girls' finishing school in Evansville, Virginia, and came home and was fixing to go, and by the way, I was going to be a lawyer. My father was a banker, but he always wanted to be a lawyer, and so I was going to go to law school, but I had a sweetheart. And the sweetheart was an orphan boy that was just raised by a family here in the community. They never adopted him. And I'd been away from him for 2 years, you know. That's a long time. for a 17-year-old girl. But anyway, we eloped and married. Well, my father, I was an only child. He was disappointed in me, but yet he said, well, you've made your bed, don't come crying to me. So I was determined I wasn't going to go crying to him. And I want to tell you, if it hadn't been for an apple tree, that we could had fried apples, we might have starved in 1928. It was depression, if you know what I mean. But anyway, for some reason or another, I decided that I'd see if I could get a school to teach. And I thought, I was not 20 years old, like a month. But you know, I had the answer to everything. I was the smartest thing that had ever hit on county. So I goes up to the courthouse and talked to the superintendent of the schoolhouse, who was a Miss Chapman at the time. If you'll go and get your records, you'll see that. And she said, oh, I'd be so happy. She said, we've got a school that hasn't got a teacher. And she said, I think we can place you. By the way, the schools had one individual who was called your trustee. He was usually, you know, someone that was rather prominent and had a little bit more knowledge than the people around. Anyway, the trustee of the school in 1928 was Will Conley, who lived, if you go to Glencoe now, that big white house sits up there on the left before you turn to go down the hill. That's where they lived.
All right.
Prior to my going to teach in 1928, Faywood Pryor, now do you know Junior Pryor?
Yes, I do.
Well, now, that was Junior Pryor's sister. She had taught at Little Hope for 4 years. Well, I taught at Little Hope from 28 for 4 years, into 31 or 32. You're talking about history. I drove from my home place. Now, when you come around, come down Sparta Pike and turn off to come here. My home place is the first farm on the right there. That's my home place. I also own the farm on the other side, and then I have a lower farm. But I drove from that home place to Little Hope 7 miles, 14 around here. A teacher in those days, you had to build your own fire. You cleaned your own outside toilet. I don't know why we had a trustee. Most of the time they had a child that they wanted you to pet, which of course that didn't suit well with me, and I didn't. But anyway, we had to go to the courthouse and pick up our supplies. We were given 1 box of chalk that was supposed to last you during the term. One, at the most 2 erasers, because if you had 2, they fall over. You had to open up at 8 o'clock, and you didn't close shop till 4. You took off the hour for lunch if you wanted to, and you had 2 recesses. All 8 grades. No air conditioning, not even any screens in the windows. Poorest of families, because most of them were sharecroppers, didn't own, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever eaten a beet sandwich?
Can't say that I have.
I was shocked to death. I had one family, when I guess I know it was all they had, beets between a biscuit. Now then, when I hear these teachers and these educators that have got all these PhDs and MAs and BSs, most of it's BS, behind their names, they can't live on their salary. The largest salary I got, and I was a graduate of this finisher, $38 a month. Huh. How many pupils? You never did know. If this family moved off and had 4, when somebody come in but half 5, usually At Little Hope, I usually had something over 25 students when I taught there.
All grades from start?
All grades. You're not recording this, are you?
Oh, yes, ma'am.
Yes, and it's beautiful.
Well, maybe I shouldn't tell you this tale, but let me tell you a story. There was one family that was coming to school. They had to walk almost 2 miles through the fields to get to the school. And there was 2 girls and a boy. But they had an older brother that was already married. And they had a child. And this little boy was about 4.5 years old, 5 maybe at the most. And his name was Bobby. I won't tell you the last name because somebody might remember some of this. I don't know who would, but anyway. So this married son came with these children, and he said, they never call me Ms. Moody, they call me Miss Lucille. He said, my wife is expecting a baby any minute. And he said, I've got nobody to take care of Bobby. He said, would it be all right if he came along with his sisters or aunts, whichever one they were? Oh, I was big-hearted, and I said, yes, but I'm going to get him a little primer, and he's going to have to go to school, and he's going to have to sit. He's going to have to do like the other children, because we have to have order. I believe in that. They'd have me in jail if I was teaching today, because I'd spank your brat whenever I thought it needed it. And I also would teach it. You wouldn't have to worry about it. It would get something out of it. Well, so Bobby was to come 2 weeks. I got him something, and I don't remember even where I got the primer. I don't know how I had the money. But anyway, finally the 2nd week, he got lazy. He didn't want to do anything. And I had been letting him sit on my lap, and we would read together, you know. Now then, the teachers have got to have that time to smoke a cigarette and drink a pop and do something on the computer. And they're so denied. Oh, they're just mistreated terribly. I get sick. But back to my story about Bobby. This is one of the cutest things that ever, and one of the lessons that I learned. That day I was not in very good mood, and Bobby couldn't remember a word that I had taught him. And I said, Bobby, you have to study your lesson at night like Loretta studies hers. That was one of the girls. He looked at me. He said, I has my works to do. Well, I should have stopped there, but me and my big mouth. I said, Bobby, what kind of work does a little fellow like you have to do? He says, I have to feed that pig 1 ear of corn and bring in the flop jar. I look back over it. I can name you the names of some of these. Do you want some of those names that went to school to me? Would they be important or would they not?
Well, you can give them.
You can give them to us.
Well, of course, Mr. Conley was my trustee the first year, and he had 1 daughter that came to school to me. Then there were the Stewarts, the Maddoxes, the Snapes, the Cliftons, the Beaches, and the Beverleys. They were the ones that I remember now. And and a lot of these are all dead, which grieves me terribly. But when I look back over it, the greatest satisfaction that I have is that I brought something to those children. They didn't even know how to set a table. They didn't know some of them didn't even I don't know whether they had forks or not. But anyway, I taught the girls how to set a table. I didn't do it during the hours that I taught because I didn't have time, but we would play at it at noontime. I had plays for them. I taught them how. One of these girls had a beautiful voice. I can hear her now. And she sang all of these old-fashioned ballads down that lonesome valley. And we thought it was a treat that on Friday afternoons we would get through some, maybe once a month, and we'd have a little show. I put on Christmas plays for them. And listen, the only reference book that I had to go to was a thick book about this thick, and it was called Century something, that a salesman came around selling, and the darn thing was $26, and I didn't really have the money, but I bought it because I had to have something to refer to. But you try teaching all 8 grades today now. But I will truly tell you that I did not have a lot of trouble in the discipline thing. I told them when I went in there, I said, well, you all really do need a teacher when you've hired me. There I was, not 5 feet, weighed 100 and, I was a little bit smaller then, about 114 feet. And I said, now, I don't plan to whip you. I knew that one of the boys had been whipped the year before. I said, I can't whip you, you can whip me. But I said, I'm going to treat you like I want to be treated. I had one instance. I don't know if you all have got girls, forgive me. But there was a controversy on the school ground one day at noon, and one of the kids came in to tell me about it. And from what the child told me, I thought the boy was to blame, and I punished him. But it wasn't the boy's fault. Girls are twice as hard to discipline as boys. That's the way I found it. But what I was going to say, one of the greatest satisfactions I have today is there are a few of them living, and they come by, or they tell me if they do see me, or they ask about me, and say that I was the best teacher they ever had. Oh, that just fills me with all this ego. I'm ready to go back teaching again.
When did you leave Little Hope School? When was the last time? How long did you taught there for 4 years?
4 years.
That was 28 to 32?
Yes, sir. Then that same year, 32, there was a young woman teaching at Poplar Grove. Her name was McDowell, and she was from Sparta. And for some reason, she wanted to go to, I think she wanted to go to Eastern. I'm not sure what college it was. But she didn't want to finish the school out. And she asked me if I would finish her school out, which I did. That's where I got Herschel Coates as a student. Herschel was always very kind to say that I taught him all I knew, and I said, yeah, and that's not much, because you don't know much. But anyway, so I know about that school. Then I came up then and finished, taught 2 years at Brumley.
Now, was there a school at Bromley and Poplar Grove?
Uh-huh.
And maybe you can tell me this, I'm interested. Why would there be a school at Poplar Grove and then one at Little Hope when they're so close together?
Well, for the very reason I'm telling you. We didn't have all of these big yellow buses picking them up, and they had to walk 2 miles. I don't know, I can't tell you now what constituted a territory for the school, but they had it divided. Usually, where they didn't have to walk as far, but so I had students that walked 2 miles.
How did you said you had to build your own fire. What kind of heat?
Well, a big old stove that sat in the middle of the room, you know. And those little people would come walking through those fields, and their clothes would be frozen too. They had to come up and sit by the stove to thaw out. A water bucket sitting back here with a dipper in it. And we didn't get sick at all. We stayed as healthy as mules. Now then, you've got to carry your bottled water. I'm telling you, I can't operate in these things. But and then I came up to Brumley School and taught there 2 years. And the Brumley School, the best way I can tell you, it's set right where you see the old store building Brumley was. It's
Right.
set right across the road. And of course, I think Conover's gave that land for that. Yeah, I think that's right. And of course, I don't know what if I was telling you anything you want to know or not.
Everything. What about Little Hope? When was the last time Little Hope was in operation, as far as you know?
Well, I would say that it was maybe to 40. I doubt it. Maybe 30, 1938 or 9 on into there. And then a family moved into it and lived in it as a home. Maddox's family lived in it there. I know the woman's name was Bessie, but I don't know what the man's name was. But, and I thought it had been torn down.
Still standing. And one of the reasons why I'm interested in this is I've been driving by that every day for 20 years.
Yeah.
And I see it up on that bank, and it's abandoned, completely abandoned. They're not making any use of it at all. And the doors seem to be solid and closed. Still has some windows in it.
Well, now, you was getting back to the fires. Of course, it was a big thing for one of the students if they would take the responsibility to go early and build the fire. But of course, my husband, we carried the kindling over there, and they also give you a load of coal. The county did, yeah. And I might say this. I'm sure you know this, or you should in your work. After they had completed the 8th grade in one of these county schools, then you see they had to go to the courthouse. They designated a day, the county superintendent did, and then they had to take an examination to see if they were eligible to go on to high school. That's how they received their, what we call certification.
Something else I'm interested in,
All right.
because this has changed, and I'm sure you're aware that it's continuing to be debated. Did you all say a prayer, or was it, or the Pledge of
Sakes
Allegiance?
alive! Of course we did, and we read scripture every morning, and and sometimes we sang, and certainly we did. Never. I tell you. I'm an oddity, and I may as well admit it. I never, as long as I've ever lived, ever been the type of person that you couldn't talk to and you couldn't reason with, because I had a daddy that taught me that very early in life. He was a very stern disciplinarian. But every time that he corrected me, he told me why he was correcting me and what the purpose was. And he always ended up with it. Now, when you are old enough to make your own decisions, okay. But until you are, I'll tell you what to do, and I expect you to do it. The thing I see, and of course if you don't have any children, you can tell everybody how to raise theirs. But instead of parents raising children today, the children are having a hard time raising the parents. But they're working at it. Don't you believe they aren't? And this is what grieves me. There never was a bad child in the beginning. in my way of thinking. God never creates anything that's imperfect that way. But the minute that you decide that your child is brighter than the other child, prettier than the other child, never tell you a story. My child never has told me a story in his life. My goodness, where are you? You're asleep. And this is why I see it all the time, and I just don't see how in the world people put up with it.
And as a teacher, you had discipline, you had education, but you incorporated scripture and singing and prayer and all that.
And social. And listen, I begged magazines. I couldn't afford to subscribe to them. I don't mind to tell you, I couldn't. Because my daddy had said to me, now there's a home place. If you all want to go out there and be my tenant, he, at the time, was president of bank in Owen County. He said, perfectly all right. But he said, I'm expecting you to be my tenant. And that's the way we were until we paid for it. I just don't know we just don't have any guts anymore. And that comes from the Pentagon on down. That's the way I feel about it. But I don't know what to tell you about it, how to solve it.
Now, Little Hope School was one room. Where did the students sit? Did they have seats or desks or chairs or what?
They had desks. And of course now, if one got broken down, why, it was up to you to fix it. They had desks. The way I did it, of course, I tried to seat them by the grade. Tried, of course, to have the first grade, you see, the second. Try and do that. Usually in the upper grade, the 8th grade, the first year that I taught a Little Hope, I just had 2 good students in the 8th grade. One was the daughter of this trustee I was telling you about, and the other one was a boy. So that wasn't too much trouble. They could sit anywhere. But that's the way I did it. I tried to keep them by the grades.
You had I guess you had a slate chalkboard.
Yes.
And 1 box of chalk for the whole year.
That was what, and if you need any more, you bought it.
Now, what about the students? What did they have for writing implements? Did they have their own
Well,
slates, or did they have?
If I remember right, you know, you're asking me to remember 75 years ago. When we went to get our supplies at the county superintendent's office, there is when they gave us the books that they had. You turned the books in, you know, and then they scheduled or re-gave them to the other one. And some of them, of course, could afford their pencils and their tablets and things like that. Some of them couldn't. And whenever they couldn't, I just took it. I just took it out of myself. You have no idea what they went through with in those days. And some of them turned out to be just real prominent people. You don't have to have a degree to be smart. Fact of it is, sometimes I think it takes away from it.
Now, Little Hope School is still sitting out there, and we're going to go out and film it a little bit. I'm going to try to talk to Mrs. Riley about allowing us to have her sister. Of course, Hazel has passed away, but her sister's, I think, taking care of things. And I'm told that the property may sell.
They were Johnsons before she married.
Okay.
Well, I didn't know it was the only one still standing. But
I'm not aware. I have looked and asked, and I do not know of any other one-room schoolhouses still standing in Owen County. And John, are you aware of any that are still standing in Kentucky? I'm sure there is somewhere.
Yeah, there's some in Kentucky, but I don't know of any other ones.
Are you writing a book on these or something?
What I'm doing is I do a little television show, and it's called Travels with the Stevensons.
Oh.
And when I find interesting folks like yourself, or Dr. Thomas Clark, who's 100 years old,
Yes.
we had him up at the picnic the other day,
Yes.
and we had a little special on him and did a little interview with him. And when I find folks like yourself that have wonderful memories and background,